All right, so I've shortened it up, and I ended up taking out 4 inches. I took out 2 inches, had it all clamped together, and still did not like the way it looked. It looked way too long in that back section still. And I think part of that is I think that touring car rear kicks up a little more in the back, which I think for this is going to look really neat when it's all done. But it's just adding to that, to the length. So I ended up taking out 4 inches, and when I cut it apart, I was really not happy with the way it had seamed together. So what I did is I went with a piece of steel. It's probably about a 14 gauge, and I had a 4-inch wide piece that was about 4 feet long. So I cut 2 sections out of that and bent them to the rough shape of the body, and I have those welded on the back side, or I have the one here welded on the back side. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see. So that gave me a really nice straight side. It looks really good now. The other one I had it straight, and when I started doing the tack welds, it had pulled in a bit. I knew I could grind it down and clean it up, but I also, when I cut it apart, I noticed that it was just very, very weak. And I know part of that is that bottom section down here being all rusted out, and I know when I get that new piece in along the bottom, that's going to stiffen that up. But I think this is definitely a better way to go, and I think I'm going to get a better joint, and I'm also going to get a stronger side panel. All right, so I'm working on the left side of the car now, and you can see the bottom of this piece is rusted out way worse than the other, and that shows how much further down the back of that touring car goes. So I'm lining everything up with that top bead. So like I said, I did not make a careful cut when I cut that body apart. So what I ended up doing is I went with some common points. So right here, I used this hole here. I went right below the door line and came up to the front edge, and I measured those spots, and I got my mark to cut the front piece. So that looks good. And then on the back piece, there's not any straight areas, but there are a couple of holes. So this is for, I believe, a fender mount, and there's a body hole there, and on the other part of the body, I've got those two same holes. So what I did is I took measurements. This one's bad here in the front, so I just used the back edge of that. I took a measurement there forward, and then I took a measurement from the edge of this forward on the other piece, and that let me get my marks on where I needed to cut. And then after I clamped it together like it is now, I went ahead and took some more measurements from the front to the rear at the top, middle, and bottom, and I'm exactly where the other one's measuring out at those common points. So for that measurement, I used one of these flexible magnetic rulers, and so these will lay out really nice. This one is 39 inches long, and it's got both inches and centimeters on it. Came from Harbor Freight, and I'm on about my fourth one. So as they start to go bad, what happens is they crack. And as they crack, what I do, sorry about the camera work, I should have this in the tripod right now. Get this one laid out. It's a spot right there where it's going bad, but it was cracking near here, so I just cut it off at 10 inches. And a lot of times I'm using these when I was building custom motorcycles and I needed to make a straight cut and I was going to do it by hand. I'd wrap this around the tubing, and then it was really easy to mark a straight piece. So, you know, if you've got your tubing so both ends are exposed or one end is exposed, you can slide another piece of tubing over to get a nice straight cut. But when you've got like you're cutting a bike apart, or you're going to make a cut to weld on a hardtail or whatever, you can't slide that piece of tubing over real easy. So these work out really nice. They do stretch, so you got to be a little careful with them that way. You know, if you're going to build a spaceship, you wouldn't want to use one of these. Not quite precise enough for that. But for this, I'm measuring the same thing from part to part, so I'm not too worried about the distance that way. I'm not putting any pressure on them when I'm doing the measurement, so I think I'm getting a really accurate measurement from one panel to the other, especially with these curved surfaces. So what I'm going to do next here is I'm going to go ahead and blue wheel down through this edge, cut this edge, and then that's the piece of like 14 gauge that I made to go in behind here. So and I just got my arrow on there to remind me that that's down. That's got a little bit of a curve through here. And then what I did is measured this so that when I make my cut along the bottom here to put in the filler piece, that new bottom edge, that edge should come right up to here, so it'll give me another weld point. If I have to, you know, I can always trim that. So I cut it exact to where the measurement looked like it was going to be, figuring that I don't think it'll be too short. If anything, it'll be a hair too long, and I can run the blue wheel along that edge and trim it up if I have to. And that'll just happen when I lay the patch panel in place and I make the cut along here to get rid of that rod on the bottom. All right, on to the next step. All right, I got the other side tacked up, and I was just interested to see if I was on with my measuring and everything. So I have the back clamped together in the middle, and I was able to put a clamp on the front here, and I didn't have to, all I had to do was push the pieces together. I didn't have to do anything to get them to line up. They were right together. So, you know, maybe rather than a street rod, this needs a motorcycle frame inside of it, and salt flats car, or maybe a cool Model T bathtub. No, I'm kidding. I'll go ahead and finish it. And it's going to have a flathead V8 up in front, 40 Ford running gear, and either my own homemade frame that I've done or possibly a Model A frame. I'm not exactly sure which way I'm going to go with that part of it yet.